The hidden reasons why Jesus chose a tax collector to lead his church. What kind of leader builds a movement by choosing the most hated man in the room? Not the strongest, not the most respected, not even the most religious, but a tax collector. Before we go any further, I want you to think about that for a second. If you were starting a movement meant to challenge the world, who would you pick? A scholar? A priest? A revolutionary? Or would you choose someone everyone already despised? Because that's exactly what Jesus did. And here's the real question. Was it mercy or strategy? If you're ready to question what you thought you knew, make sure you're subscribed. Because what we're about to uncover isn't just about Matthew. It changes how you see the entire foundation of the early church. Let's go back to the moment it happened. A roadside, dust in the air, people moving in and out of the city. And sitting there at a booth is a man named Matthew, not a fisherman, not a follower, a tax collector. In first century Judea, that label meant something very specific. Tax collectors worked for Rome, the occupying empire. They were seen as traitors to their own people, men who profited from oppression. They collected more than required, pocketed the difference, and lived comfortably while their own neighbors struggled. So let me ask you something. What kind of reputation do you think Matthew had? Would people trust him? Would they follow him? Or would they cross the street just to avoid being seen near him? Now imagine Jesus walking straight up to that man and saying 2 words, "Follow me." No lecture, no conditions, no probation period. Just follow me. And Matthew does. He gets up, leaves everything behind, and walks away from the tax booth. But here's the part most people don't stop to think about. Why him? Out of everyone Jesus could have chosen, why pick someone trained by Rome? Was it simply forgiveness? Or was something else happening beneath the surface? Let's look closer. Because Matthew wasn't just any tax collector. He was trained. Roman tax systems weren't random. They were structured, documented, precise. To survive in that role, Matthew had to understand numbers, contracts, logistics, and most importantly, records. He knew how to track transactions. He knew how to organize information. He knew how to write, and not just in one language. Tax collectors in that region often operated in both Aramaic, the common spoken language, in Greek, the administrative and trade language of the empire. So now ask yourself this. Out of all the disciples, how many had that skill set? Fishermen could cast nets. They could navigate water. They understood patience and survival. But could they document a movement? Could they preserve teachings accurately? Could they structure something that would outlive them? Or did that require someone else entirely? Because here's where things get interesting. The early Jesus movement didn't stay small. It spread quickly across regions, across cultures, across languages. And movements like that don't survive on inspiration alone. They need structure. They need records. They need someone who understands systems. So what if Matthew wasn't just a forgiven sinner? What if he was an intentional choice? What if Jesus wasn't just calling a disciple, but recruiting an administrator? Think about the gospel attributed to Matthew. It's one of the most structured accounts we have. Carefully organized teachings, detailed genealogy, systematic presentation of Jesus' words. It reads differently, more ordered, more deliberate, almost like it was written by someone trained to document information. Coincidence or design? Now let's push this further. Because Jesus didn't just choose Matthew. He chose a pattern. He chose fishermen for resilience. He chose zealots for passion. He chose doubters for honesty. And he chose a tax collector for precision. So what does that tell you? Was Jesus building a spiritual circle or assembling a fully functional movement? Because if you look at it that way, every choice starts to make sense. Not emotionally, strategically, but there's another layer here, and it might be the most uncomfortable one. By choosing Matthew, Jesus didn't just forgive a sinner. He disrupted a social order. He took someone labeled as corrupt, unclean, and disloyal, and gave him authority. So what does that do to the idea of worthiness? If the most hated man can be chosen, what does that say about the criteria? Was Jesus ignoring reputation or redefining it completely? And think about how people would have reacted. The religious leaders watching this unfold. A teacher claiming authority from God, surrounding himself with fishermen, yes, but also a collaborator with Rome. Would that look like divine wisdom or chaos? Would it build trust or destroy credibility? Because from the outside, it doesn't look clean. It doesn't look organized. It looks messy. And yet, it worked. So here's the question that sits at the center of all of this. Was Matthew chosen in spite of who he was, or because of it? Because if it's the second one, then everything changes. It means the early church wasn't built on purity first. It was built on function, on capability, on the ability to sustain something bigger than a moment. And that brings us back to you. If you were there, would you have followed Matthew? Would you trust a man with that past? Or would you question the entire movement because of him? Be honest, because that tension, that hesitation, is exactly where the story lives. The truth is, movements that change the world rarely look perfect in the beginning. They look unlikely. They look uncomfortable. They look like the wrong people being chosen for the right reasons. And maybe that's the point. Before we close, I want you to think about one final question. If Jesus deliberately chose people based on what they could build, not just who they were, then what kind of people would he choose today? The most religious or the most capable? The most accepted or the most overlooked? If this made you think differently, leave a comment. I want to know your perspective. Would you have trusted Matthew? And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Because we're going to keep asking the questions most people were taught not to ask. Because sometimes the real story isn't what you were told. It's what you were never asked to notice.